Good evening. Welcome to Grace and Gavel, where truth meets compassion. My name is Buffy. I'm an 18-year plus criminal defense attorney who also practices, has done jury trials, so I can speak on the issue of jury trials and such. Today, we're talking about the Thomas Quick scandal, how a justice system convicted a story instead of a crime. What if a confession isn't evidence, but a performance? What if courts stop asking whether something is true and only asks whether it feels complete? This is the story of Stur Bergwall, known for years as Thomas Quick, and how an entire system abandoned skepticism. The setting: when authority replaces proof. Sweden in the 1990s wanted answers. Unsolved cases, public pressure, a cultural trust in institutions. Into that environment stepped Bergwall, heavily medicated, psychologically vulnerable, and eager to be believed. Therapy as an interrogation. This is one of the most dangerous aspects of the case. Recovered memory therapy. I don't know if you guys remember, like during the 80s, there was like the satanic panic in which children were being like hypnotized, and they were talking about the satanic cults that they had been like sexually abused in these satanic cults. And I believe there was a daycare in California where there was like this, I think it was a grandma or a mother and a son, and I think maybe a daughter who were running that daycare. And the problem that I saw, I used to do forensic interviews. I've actually represented domestic violence victims as well as also did forensic interviews for sexual assault cases, and did some work with the child welfare department where I'm at, and guardian ad litem work and things like that. And ultimately, it's really, really important about how you question children, which is why it's called forensic interview. And essentially, a forensic interview is when you sit a child down and you talk to them. Like, you're not suggesting things to them. You're not saying, now, did dad harm you in any way? How did dad do blah, 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 and feed them information? That is absolutely not the right way to do something. And you also want the child to feel comfortable, and you don't want them to shut down. You want to try to get the story out there so you can protect them. That is the ultimate goal. And so therapy as interrogation is definitely against the standard, as well as kind of using something against someone who's emotionally and mentally vulnerable. Leading questions again. Isn't it true that you hit this person on the head? Did you or did you not do that? The person says no. And it's like, but you hit that person on the head, didn't you? Or no? Or if let's say, for instance, the person was like ran over by a car, and the person says to you, when they're confessing, they say to you, I stabbed him. But why was it that he was hit by a car? Did you realize that you hit him with the car? You're feeding them and asking them, telling them what to say. And then also offering rewards for confessions. Punishment for uncertainty. People know expected responses. Even people who may not seem to be the most intellectually, they might seem like they don't have it all together intellectually, know what is expected of them. It's something that they learn very, very soon. So essentially what they were doing is they were not uncovering his memory, they were constructing his memory, guiding him on what was true and what they needed him to say. And once the narrative took shape, no one wanted to dismantle it. So confessions without evidence. If you have no DNA, no witnesses, no corroboration, yet convictions stacked up. And there is something that says you can't just have a confession. You have to have independent evidence that supports that confession. And then when you go back and you listen to the tapes, and it's like, this person was ran over, but he said that they were stabbed. Clearly, he does not know what happened in this case. And then you listen to the leading questions by the investigators, because they're wanting to shut this case down and they're wanting to get a conviction from someone who is an innocent person. Why do convictions stack up? Because once multiple authorities agree, doubt becomes inconvenient. It becomes just another thing that they're going to have to deal with later and that they want to shut down right now. This is confirmation bias at an institutional level. And the unraveling, it wasn't the courts that fixed this, it was journalists. Independent investigation revealed fabricated details, suppressed contradictions, circular validation between therapists, prosecutors, and judges. One by one, convictions collapsed. And why this case is terrifying, which it is seriously terrifying. This wasn't corruption in the shadows. It was good intentions, unchecked authority, and belief that systems can't be wrong. So ultimately, how can a justice system become convinced of something that isn't true? Because sometimes closing a case is extremely important to people. And it doesn't matter whether or not, some criminal or someone who has a criminal record is, he's innocent. Oh yeah, well, he's done other things, so who cares? That is not the attitude to have, right? We all deserve our day in court for fairness, to be properly interrogated. We don't need authority telling us that this person did this and them feeding them information. We don't need to worry about recovered memory therapy failures or institutional confirmation bias or courts deferring to experts instead of evidence. This is where we see how truth collapses even without bad intentions, because I can't claim that these individuals did this with a malice in their hearts or an evil motive, because we don't know. And it doesn't say that they did either. I'm just showing how easy it is for confessions to be manufactured. Sometimes they believe that if they tell the police what they want to hear, they can go home. Now, do you think the police actually say to them, hey, tell us what we want to hear and then you can go home? You're not going to be arrested. You're not going to be charged, any of that. Maybe there are some that do. But ultimately, I think that's them thinking, okay, I just got to say what I got to say and then I'm done. And oftentimes, evidence can become secondary to the narrative that they believe and that they've hooked their hat on because they feel like they can solve this crime. And also how sometimes systems validate themselves. Like it's the whole self-fulfilling prophecy, the confirmation bias. Well, we all believe this and, we're seasoned detectives and, we're seasoned law enforcement, so we know. So if this can happen once, it can happen anywhere, and I'm not trying to scare anybody or anything like that. Just know that, there are false confessions. And I remember before I got into the legal field, I didn't understand how you could confess to something that you didn't do. But it happens more than we like to admit and more than we care to admit. So, why the death penalty fails? Why irreversible punishment is incompatible with a system that is fragile, that is not foolproof. Juvenile brain development. The juvenile brain does not develop until age maybe 26 to 29, depending on who we're talking about. If there's an intellectual disability, that person is not going to understand the consequences that they're facing. I did a podcast on Brendan Dassey. He is a very good example of that. False confessions, right? False confessions thinking that they can admit to it and then they go home. That's usually not the case. Poverty and race is also another issue with the death penalty. Unequal defense resources. Discovery dependence, trying to find that. Expert imbalance. Human error, because ultimately we're human. We make mistakes. We are no longer arguing about abstract morality. We're talking about systems that can easily fail us. And that's terrifying. Some people are like, well, the person shouldn't have even put themselves in the crosshairs of law enforcement anyway. Okay, but that happened. Should they die for that? I submit not. Should they be given the death penalty for that? No, they should be given a fair trial. A justice system that can be wrong cannot safely wield irreversible punishment. Thomas Quick becomes the proof. The death penalty becomes the danger. And ultimately, we can definitely do a deep dive into the death penalty and those that have been, executed wrongfully, which is a sad, sad thought, guys. Really, really is. Well, thank you for tuning in, and I hope I gave you a little something to think about. And if you have any questions or any ideas for some stories that you're interested in, please feel free to drop them in the community page, and I would be happy to entertain those ideas. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.